Good afternoon. Um, Thank you for joining us in the first virtual SAS Afternoon Forum. This forum was originally scheduled in late February, but it was postponed due to COVID-19. So during the circuit breaker period, the SAS still continues to offer the CPD events for our members. So we take the opportunity to explore this virtual platform, Zoom, and continue with the afternoon forum for our members. So as you know, this is a virtual afternoon forum. Most of us are working from home, so we seek your understanding if there's any interruption, because all of the speakers are working from home, some with kids, pets, some background noise we can control if the aeroplanes are flying over. So what we have control is to remain positive, resilient during this time, and also remain inquisitive and continue to learn during the circuit breaker period. So I would like to thank the volunteers, the three speakers who agreed to spend the personal time to come up with the slides on this presentation to share with our members here. I would also like to thank our forum coordinator, YY, who helps to explore the Zoom platform for us to organize this afternoon forum. Last but not least, thank you SAS Secretariat, as well as our SAS sponsor, China Re, for making this possible. As some of you know, the SAS Health Committee works very closely with the International Actuarial Association Health Section, and we were jointly organizing the health conference, but because of COVID-19, this has been postponed till next year. However, the Health Committee has been working with the IAAHS on this comparative healthcare funding paper, and this afternoon forum is an extension of that. The SAS Health Committee contributed to a number of countries in this healthcare funding paper, namely Singapore, Indonesia, Korea, and China. One of the speakers, Albertus, also spoke in the IAAHS webinar last year. We extended this session to include the universal healthcare in Singapore by comparing against Indonesia, so the audience here could relate better to the Indonesia system. We also added peer-to-peer healthcare funding to give you some background of this newish healthcare, you can call it, probably can't call it insurance, like healthcare funding, and leave some thoughts for the audience here today. Well, we are in this COVID-19 situation. This is not a COVID-19 afternoon forum. We know that COVID-19 is health-related and is taking a lot of the public healthcare resources. This risk is still evolving. The SAS is forming a multidisciplinary working party to better understand this risk holistically. There should be a call for volunteers soon on this, so please keep a lookout for that. So without further ado, let me go through some of the housekeeping matters. Please kindly change your display name to your registered name, so this will allow the Secretariat to validate attendance for this afternoon forum. You will notice that you have been muted because that is to allow for our speakers to talk without interruption. You're encouraged to type your questions in the chat box in Zoom. Send it to me. I will compile the questions to ask the speakers at the end. Please note that the views expressed by the speakers are those of his own, do not represent the views from SAS or his company. We do welcome feedback as usual, so please spend 1 minute at the end to answer the poll at the end of this forum. One thing that we would like to especially acknowledge in today's forum is to acknowledge our sponsors in 2019 that helps SAS to conduct a full program of conferences, events, and forums in 2019, including AAC 2019. In this year, we are thankful for China Re to support us during unprecedented times like this. These funds will continue to allow SAS to continue to conduct conferences, events, and forums, whether or not it's virtual and land-based this year. Let me introduce the speakers, and then I will pass the screen to them. So we have here today three speakers. Albertus, who is a business development actuary from RGA. He will talk about the national healthcare system in Indonesia. Prior to joining RGA in 2019, Albert worked nearly 4 years for another international reinsurance company as senior actuarial analyst and then as a business development manager, utilizing his strategic thinking and creative problem-solving skills. He started his career as a senior actuarial executive at Aviva. Albert received a Bachelor of Business degree with honors from NTU and is an active member of the SAS. Jairus, our second speaker here, is an associate with PwC in Singapore. He provides support to the actuarial team based in Singapore. He graduated from NUS with a bachelor degree in business and statistics. Robin is from Aviva. He's a fellow of the Society of Actuaries with 6 years of experience in individual, life, and group business. He started as a pricing executive in Aviva. Upon attaining his fellowship, he moved on to distributor value management to broaden his field of expertise. Prior to joining Aviva, Robin spent 2 years as an actuary consultant with Passion Global, specializing in pricing and underwriting of group business and reinsurance brokerage. So without further ado, let me pass the screen to our first speaker, Albertus.
Hello. Hi. Okay, can I just check if everyone can hear my voice now?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So thanks for the introduction, Kay, and thanks everyone for joining in this lunch hour on Friday before the weekend. So I guess in the next couple of minutes, hopefully 30 minutes around, I'll be sharing some knowledge on Indonesian National Healthcare Scheme. I'll just call it BPJS BPJS scheme throughout my presentation to sort of identify this national healthcare scheme. Now, like what Kay mentioned, we did present this as part of SAS into IAA audience back in October. Now, before I started, I just want to start with maybe one caveat. Just like any healthcare scheme, it does move with time. The information that you would see along this presentation will be accurate as of August 2019. Now, if somebody who's probably watching this in 2022, 2025, I think some of the parameters might have changed. So without further ado, let's start. Okay. These are the agenda for today. So I'll start by talking a brief history about Indonesian National Healthcare Scheme, and then I'll touch about who is BPJS Kesehatan. Then I'll go down in granular details of what is the component of the scheme itself from the perspective of member, fundings, benefits, and the role of private insurance. And then we'll end with a little bit discussion of challenges that face the scheme and end it with summary. Okay, so brief history. Indonesia gained independence in 1945, but only in 1949 that the government of Dutch officially acknowledged Indonesian independence. And back then already there was a thinking about universal healthcare scheme by the Ministry of Health in 1949. Now, nothing really happens until 1968, where the government of Indonesia started forming this organization that provide a healthcare scheme. But at that point of time, it's not really universal yet. It's probably mainly focusing on the government staff, pensioners, including the family. 68 to 92 is a quick development in Indonesia, and in the 92, the same entity is now called PT Askes, which is a state-owned company. Now, they do extend this healthcare scheme to the government still, government staff. But in 2005, there's a leap where now it's not just the government staff that benefits from this healthcare scheme. It's now open to family who are less privileged, and it benefits around 60 million of individual. And all this scheme is really funded from the subsidy of the government. Now, in 2011, that was when the first time a universal healthcare scheme, the bill was really issued, and PT Askes was appointed at that point of time as the operator and changed its name into BPJS Kesehatan. And fast forward in 2014, January, there is the first official universal healthcare scheme in Indonesia, and it's run by BPJS, state-owned company, as its operator. So who is BPJS Kesehatan? Now, BPJS Kesehatan itself is an operator, so much like a CPF in Singapore context, who manage the universal healthcare scheme in Indonesia. So I'll just call it BPJS scheme. The mission really are three items. The first one is to provide the best service to the member. The second one is to widen the coverage to include all Indonesian. Now, I just want to emphasize this point. It is actually not a small challenge. It is actually a big challenge because in Indonesia, they have about 250 million. So to leap from 60 million to 250 million, it is quite a challenge. And the last bit is to ensure sustainability of the scheme. And essentially, BPJS Kesehatan is mandated to realize the ideals of National Universal Healthcare Scheme in Indonesia. So a quick snapshot of the performance in 2018. BPJS paid around 6.3 billion USD in total claim. About 640,000 customers per day consume healthcare under the scheme. So that's a large number. The scheme itself in 2018 experienced deficit, P&L deficit of USD 780 million. And cumulatively since the funding, since it started, in 2014, the cumulative deficit is around 2.3 billion, including subsidy. So this is after the subsidy. So let's touch a little bit about the component of the scheme. So the first one is about the members, and on the left chart here you could see the breakdown of the members. There are essentially 5 categories, but probably I'll just further simplify it into 2. One is the non-paying members here. And then the second one here is the paying members, meaning the one who put a contribution. As of August 2019, the membership is around 221 million. And you could see that largest membership category is really coming from the non-paying members. So it make up around 60% of the total membership, or 132 million people. The membership itself is compulsory. And let's deep dive a little bit under this membership category. So for the non-paying members, now it is not an automatic thing. So a person have to go to the municipality, to the local government, and they have to show that they are eligible. And most of the time is based on their socio-economic profile and whether they can afford paying the contribution. Once they satisfy that, and then the local government will sort of categorize them as eligible, and then most of the funding will be taken care by the subsidy. And then the 3 members here, which is the paying members, it sort of break down into whether you are working for the government, whether you're working for private companies, and the last bit is probably more relevant for entrepreneur and those expatriate who works in Indonesia for at least 6 months. Now, one interesting here is you could see here there is an asterisk where it says include core family. And yes, so the scheme itself, once you are enrolled, your core family will automatically be covered, and they further define core family being spouse and up to 3 kids. So the 4th kid, could they join? Yes, there will be additional fee charged on them. So I'll talk about the fee part component later on. Now, the last bit is for not working. I think this is really just a small minor proportion where it's mainly most of them are pensioners, Merdeka generation, meaning those who were sort of lived through the independence, and most of their funding will sort of be taken care by the pension providers, which most of the time is government. Okay, now so let's take a look at the benefit side. So much like any healthcare, it covers inpatient and outpatient. So I probably wouldn't touch in greater detail here. I think this would be something that we will be familiar from Shield. So it has inpatient, your usual outpatient services. But Beyond that, it actually also provides primary care. So things like preventative care, vaccine, GP consultations, um, and other medications. So even dental is part of this primary care. Now, as you can see, the card here on the right hand side, top of the slide, every member who joined the scheme, you will be issued this card, and this card allows you to have a cashless benefits. So any benefits you get and you receive from either primary care or inpatient, there's actually no out-of-pocket money. So it's cashless, it is taken care at the back end. Now, the only catch with that is that there is a process that one has to go through, meaning you can't jump straight to inpatient. For you to be admitted, you have to go through a referral process, meaning the first step is primary care, consult with GP. Only after you get the GP referral, then you can sort of go into the inpatients. So this is just form of sort of managed and control the utilization. And like universal healthcare, one of the key features that the Indonesian universal healthcare scheme has is that it doesn't have any deductible, no co-insurance, no annual limit, no lifetime limit. So it's really trying to embrace the ideal of universal healthcare. Okay. I maybe just a quick note that there seems to be something here, some line. I'm not sure how that how that came about, but just bear with it for a while as the team is trying to resolve. Okay, so the next bit is about the funding of the scheme itself. So this framework tried to summarize the sort of funding. The left-hand side is where the contribution flow into the BPJS from paying members, non-paying members, and the government. And then the right-hand side is where the service is provided and eventually, the cost being reimbursed by the scheme. So let's take a look on the left-hand side first. Okay, so paying members, contribute regular contribution to the BPJS scheme, and paying members include salaried workers, those who have an employer. So much like those who work in office, they contribute 5% of monthly salary. In specific, 4% will come from employer, 1% from employee, and then the share is automatically deducted from the salary. For non-salaried workers, I think about those who either have their business as an entrepreneur or have is an expat. They have to pay like a monthly premium to the fund or to the scheme. So think about it like your usual insurance premium. And the last one is for the non-working. These are the pensioners, and they are typically funded, and any contribution being paid by the government. The eligible non-paying members, again, their premium, as mentioned earlier, their contribution will be paid by the national, local government. And recall 60% of the members are actually in this group category. Now, the last bit here really is in terms of funding, the government of Indonesia will act as a final guarantor. So any time the scheme is in deficits and needs some additional capital, that's where the government will come in. And usually this will form part of the annual government budget. So let's take a look in a little bit more granular on the contribution aspect. As mentioned earlier, eligible non-paying members is basically nothing out of their pockets. So this is biggest membership category. For the paying members, the salaried workers, which is around 15% of the membership category, they pay around 5% of salary. There is a salary cap in here, so about 8 million. And I think we talked earlier, if you have the 4th kids or even if you have extended family, they can be covered with 1% extra out of the employee's pocket. For non-salaried workers, the entrepreneur, those who have a business, the premium is broken down based on class tiering in the hospital. So I think in Singapore contexting along the line of, you go to ward A, B, B2 or C. So class 1 is probably the highest. And they pay about $5.3 per month. And in class 3, the lowest, where you have to shed rate, you pay about $1.6 per month. Now, if you look at this range, oh, by the way, this bit, you don't have, there is no age tiering for the non-salaried workers. So regardless of age, you pay based on the class that you choose. Now, the big question really is, how is this made possible? Like $5 per month, that is $60 per annum. The premium really low, and really it's made possible because the government has been tapping and paying the bill essentially. So here, something extracted from one of the reports from BPJS. On this column, you see how much they are charging to the members. And then on this column is how much the cost would be if they employ the actual calculation. And the last column really represent the subsidy. So here you could see for every non-paying members, the government has been tapping the bill of $1.50. There is some left here, so it's not fully funded. The remaining cost is actually funded by sort of cross subsidy from a different member category. For salaried workers, government actually top up that 1%, additional 1%. And for the non-salaried workers, the subsidy vary, with class 3 having the highest number of subsidy. And when you start multiplying the numbers by 60 million, you sort of get the picture that the amount of subsidy is not small. It is actually large. Okay, so now let's take a look at the right-hand side now, where the sort of the benefits is being provided and how the reimbursement model looks like. So BPJS will actually, first of all, have a network of providers. So they have a GP, polyclinic, public hospital, or private hospital that it belong to this network, right? By doing so, what BPJS does is then it's allowed them to actually have a pre-agreed arrangement upfront, and any healthcare services provided to the members, the cost will be reimbursed from this pre-agreed arrangement. So for example, for GP, they do have a schedule that outline a monthly fee per member per month. So depending on how many number of members that seeks the consultation, then the cost will just be reimbursed accordingly. For inpatient specialists, paid according to certain fee schedule. And for any services that are bundled under the inpatient service, so think about surgical and then treatment, they will be bundled according to international refined diagnosis. And then from there is an agreed fee schedule. Okay, so the last component of BPJS really is the collaboration with private insurer and how private insurer can play its part. Now, BPJS allow private to sort of have this thing called coordination of benefits, where the private insurer can then come in and top up some of the benefits not currently being covered. So what are those benefits? The first one is offer higher class ward. That's probably beyond the class 1. And the second one is probably the main one, where there is it offers access to network, which access to hospital providers or healthcare providers beyond BPJS network. Now, I think at this point, maybe some might wonder, how come? I thought, wouldn't BPJS network cover all healthcare providers? The answer is not. I'll touch on that later, why some might not necessarily want to join the network. But on the premium sides, so how this coordination of benefit work is that members could either opt to pay for the total premium to BPJS, or the private insurance can collect on the behalf of the BPJS and then pass the portion to the BPJS. In terms of benefit payment, again, from the customer side, there is no out-of-pocket. So that's still cashless. It's more on how the bill is split between BPJS and the private insurer. And the arrangement, either BPJS will cover payment and then later on split, or the other way around. So I think just now I touched briefly around why some providers may not necessarily want to be part of the network. A part of the reason really being is the pre-agreed costs, right? that may not necessarily align with the providers who might be privately run and commercially motivated. So that could create some concern if the cost is perceived as low. The other bit is, I think, probably some can say right, some can say wrong, but what I'm hearing is probably got to do with counterparty risks, especially when the scheme is running on quite substantial deficit. Now, to the members, I think one of the downside, if you will, from this arrangement is that despite having the potential access to other provider, members still have to go through the referral process. So they can't again jump the queue and access into the private hospital. They still have to go through the referral process that BPJS put in place. So they have to go through GP. Then only when there's a referral, they can go to inpatient, and the waiting time can be quite long usually. And this is well, from my sort of observation from the market, actually the take up is not as high in terms of coordination of benefits. And it's not uncommon to see, some employers offer, this coordination on benefit because it's compulsory anyway, and then opt for private arrangement at the same time. Okay, so we talk about the component. Now let's touch a little bit on challenges. On overview, the three mission here on the left side is what BPJS is trying to reach. Overall, they have been quite successful in terms of widening the coverage to include all Indonesian. But some of the key challenges will remain, and in particular, got to do with sustainability of the scheme. I will also touch a little bit on the service to the members. Let's take a look first in terms of the expansion of the membership. On the graph here, you could see the membership of the scheme starting from 2005, where they opened for 60 million, beneficiaries, up to 2019 of 220. So this is actually quite a big achievement. A reason being is, if you think about Indonesia, the scale of 220 million or 250 million population is not small. And the country is divided into 3 different time zones, and some can be quite remote. So to get every enrollment, everybody inside is not a small feat, and they actually contributed this really success part of it to implementation of ID. I think this probably only happened somewhere in 2015. Before that, ID was something you print on the paper. Now ID is actually can be logged in terms of e-ID, if you will. And then improvement of premium payment facilities. So think about rural area where they may not necessarily have an ATM to begin with. Some creative solution like opening a premium to be payable on mini mart nearby. So that sort of helped increase the enrollment. But really, what does it mean to sustainability and quality of service? So here I just put a snapshot, and probably not surprising. I think earlier I also mentioned cumulative deficits, and that creates a big challenge on sustainabilities. And when we look into details, I think there are really three items that sort of influence this sustainability. The first one is the utilization. It seems to be higher than expected. Well, the first one, when you have an increased number of members, you have increased number of demand. That seems to increase rapidly, and then the demand increase, the cost, naturally will increase. The second one is going to do with overconsumption. The choice between primary and inpatient sometimes is not very clear. So, for example, people with chronic condition, they are controlled. Actually, they can sort of be referred back to primary, GP for ongoing consultation. Instead, some choose to go for outpatient, and that can be costly. And the second one is, some members who live in suburban, rural, remote area, they may not even have GP to begin with. So, or if there is a GP, they would say, hey, I'm not qualified to take on this. So then they get referral to go to a nearby town for for inpatient and outpatient care. Again, that will drive up some of the consumption. There is also an adverse selection being observed. So it's not uncommon to in early years that the members will skip paying the premium, so they do not want to pay premium until they need it, usually for elective surgery. um, some would also once they perform that surgery, they decided to stop paying the premium again. This is not uncommon. uh, And in terms of fraud, there is some indication of it where some hospitals tend to use a particular coding where the benefits or the reimbursement amount from BPJS tend to be higher. And the last bit is the control of benefit. I think usually in private insurer provider, you'll be familiar with medically necessary. Um, I suppose in this context, it's not as easy because some of the benefit can be elective, like dental treatment, reading glasses. Is that really medically necessary, or is that more of a cosmetic? So there is seen some utilization on this aspect. Sorry, give me a moment now. Let me just mute my sound for a while. There seems to be a background noise. Okay, thanks. Thanks for bearing with me. uh, okay. So the next one, the other bits that can affect the sustainability really is the benefits offered is actually more expensive than what the the contribution being collected with. And this is really the fundamental problem in this scheme itself, because as we said earlier, in terms of actually calculated costs, that is actually you know um, higher than what the contribution being charged, and that means the scheme will naturally run into the deficits. Just to illustrate, in 2019 itself, the Ministry of Indonesia, the finance, is actually prepared to pump about 13 trillion or USD 870 million to try to clear the deficits. Okay, the last bit is got to do with political climates. So at the end of the day, you could see how much good story came about, providing subsidy and all. And once you do that, it's not going to be so easy to take out or to update. And the decision to increase the premium or to even remove the subsidy, it's not an easy one, and it's very much depend on the political climate. Now, I just to illustrate the example of this, and this is actually real. At that time in 2019, when we were discussing this and presenting this to IAA, we were still talking about premium as per what I presented earlier. And then in late 2019, actually the government decided, hey, we need to increase the premium. So here you can see they decided to increase the premium, right? This is a higher amount relative to what was originally charged, which is around this level. And then in February, that increase in premium, while it sort of meet the local legislative, it was blocked later on at the court, and the court decided to just reverse it back. And there's a lot of drama, a lot of hoo-ha, people going down to the street, trying to oppose this increase in premium, and you could see that the increase is almost double. And only, I think about 1 week ago, 1 or 2 weeks ago, I can't recall, they decided to increase again. So the government decided, no, there is no way we can sustain it. We'll try to increase it. So you'll end up in this very unusual structure where membership from January to March, you have a new premium. And then April, June, you have back to normal premium. And then June onwards or July onwards, you have a new version. And I think it's really sort of the key message here is really trying to illustrate that what this is not just about the funding, but but it's about having that, that forces of political climate really determining the sustainability as well. Now, the service quality itself, this one probably is more of anecdotal. In a sense, I do still have a family down there. I do have some of my clients are telling me some of this story. So some of the sort of feedback they provided is that the queue time is long. Some of the surgery you need to wait as long as 3 months. Actually, this particular one I personally happened in my family. One of my family members who wanted to go for surgery via BPJS was actually being told after the consultation with GP that he will need to wait for 3 months before the surgery is being performed. The second one is limited ward under private hospital. I think we touched a bit on it. There is lack of incentive because of the pre-agreed arrangement of costs that BPJS will reimburse. And some also have a concern on liquidity and counterparty risk. And what that means is, if you can't access this private hospital where usually they will in-house specialist doctor, then you might lose out on that access once if you enroll into BPJS scheme. But to be fair, this might be a few of some, but not all members. And if I can be very specific, perhaps this is mainly view of the affluent segment rather than the mass. The reason being really when I sort of took a look at the 2018 reports, actually 8 in 10 find that the service provided by BPJS are very satisfactory. And if you could sort of picture before that you don't have access to inpatient at all, now you have that access, and if you can't pay, you get subsidy, and there's nothing literally out of pocket. So I think for this group, it is really universal. It is really helpful. So I think these numbers probably represent that big group of people who now have that access of coverage. And 7.5%, about 75% actually find that facility providers are satisfactory. So I think in summary, really BPJS scheme is Indonesian Universal Healthcare Scheme. It started from 2014. It is run and managed by the state-owned operator BPJS Kesehatan, who is mandated to ensure smooth operation, ensure sustainability of the scheme, and realize the ideal of universal healthcare scheme for Indonesia. The premium for member from low segment, which is I think about 60 million, or about 60%, is fully subsidized by the government for those who are unable to afford. It's been quite successful in achieving its aim of widening coverage for all Indonesian, but some of the challenges remain and mainly got to do with sustainability of the scheme itself. So I think with that, I reached the end. So thank you, and I'll now pass this to Hee-Jun.
All right, thanks, Kay, for the introduction. So Singapore and Indonesia has embarked on significant healthcare reforms toward universalism in the past few years. Singapore has transited to universal health coverage with MediShield Life in 2015, while Indonesia has introduced the National Health Insurance System in 2014. So for my presentation, I'll make comparison and assess the prospects of these two healthcare systems in terms of the financial sustainability and equity to healthcare services. So I'll begin by giving a quick overview of Singapore healthcare system. Afterwards, I'll compare Singapore system to that of Indonesia with regards to financial sustainability, where I'll talk about the fund experience, revenue sources, and expenditure. And lastly, I'll end off my presentation by comparing them to the equity to healthcare services. So Singapore healthcare system is based on the philosophy of individual responsibility. This principle is a firmly held belief by the government that every individual is responsible for their health and should bear part of the cost to healthcare. The government, on the other hand, ensures that healthcare remains affordable and accessible to all. So Singapore healthcare system is financed through the 3M plus S framework, where 3M represents MediSave, MediShield Life, and MediFund, and S for subsidies. So first, MediSave is a mandatory saving account that is funded by one's income to help Singapore residents pay for large inpatient and selected outpatient bills. Singapore citizens and PR are required to contribute on average 8 to 10.5% of their monthly salary, and there are also limits to the amount that can be withdrawn from the MediSave account. These restrictions are in place so that a portion of the healthcare expenses are paid from their own pockets or with private insurance. This also ensures that there are sufficient savings for future needs. So next, MediShield Life is Singapore universal healthcare insurance meant to help Singaporeans pay for large hospital bills. MediShield provides coverage for all wards type, with benefit typically sufficient to cover for subsidized healthcare at the B2 or C ward level. So policyholders can also supplement with an integrated shield plan to help cover additional costs should they wish to use an A or B1 ward in public hospital or go to private hospital. And the last of the 3 M's, MediFund, is a mean-tested social welfare program. It's meant for individuals who have exhausted all help available to pay for their medical bills. And to ensure that healthcare remains affordable, the government provides heavy subsidies. This includes the hospitalization ward subsidies, where heavy subsidies are given at the class B2 or C wards level, and the amount of subsidies actually depends on one's income. There's also the Community Health Assist Scheme, which enables all Singaporean citizens to receive subsidies at participating healthcare facilities so as to reduce their out-of-pocket expenses. It was also recently extended to cover all Singaporeans with chronic conditions. And there are also the Pioneer Generation as well as the Merdeka Generation package, where MediSave top-ups as well as subsidies for MediShield Life premiums are given. So MediShield Life effectively replaced the MediShield on 1st November 2015 with the aim of providing financial protection for all Singaporean citizens and PR against large hospital bills for life regardless of age or health condition. So in essence, MediShield Life compared to its predecessor provides better protection, it's more inclusive and protects for life. And to recap what Albertus mentioned, BPJS, the Indonesia Universal Healthcare Scheme, also aims to achieve similar goals by providing coverage for all its population. And the table on the right actually shows the benefits of MediShield Life against that of BPJS Kesehatan. And one notable difference between the two, as you might have seen, is that MediShield Life has co-payment features such as deductibles and co-insurance. There's also an annual benefit limit of $100,000 and additional 30% premium loading for policyholders with pre-existing conditions. So financial sustainability is a core principle of any social security scheme, and it's necessary to ensure that there are sufficient funds to meet unprecedented spikes in claims and to pay for long-term liabilities. So for my presentation, I'll define financial sustainability as a positive state whereby the revenue received, basically the members' contribution, exceeds expenditure with the benefits and payouts. So for the fund experience, for Singapore, the MediShield Life is valued at 7.1.
How much?
According to MOH, 3/4 of the fund comprises of reserves to meet future claim liabilities and the remainder to safeguard against adverse scenario. So the income loss ratio, which is the ratio of the sum of claim paid and reserves to the earned premium, is a good indication of the health of the fund as it represents the ability of the funds to meet its current as well as its future liabilities. So MediShield Life has an average income loss of 98% over the period 2014 to 2018. This shows that the fund is sustainable but not excessive. So on the other hand, BPJS Kesehatan has been in deficit since its first year of inception, and a year-on-year paid ratio of over 100%, and this figure is expected to rise with increased enrollment of participants. So as seen from the chart below, the cumulative deficit, which is the total claims paid less premium received, has been increasing over the years. And according to Indonesia's finance minister, the shortfall between premium and spending is mainly attributed to non-payment from the participants in the informal sector who stop paying after receiving their healthcare benefits. So like most social security schemes in the world, the funding for the scheme comes from the members' contribution. Thus, for the fund to remain sustainable, it's important to ensure the adequacy and collectability of the contribution. So as seen from the flowchart, premium for the MediShield Life is typically paid using the MediSave account, which is funded by the policy CPF contribution. So Singapore CPF contribution and allocation rate actually changes to reflect the changing need as we grow old. So below the age of 35, CPF contribution will amount to 37% of the monthly salary, of which majority will go to the ordinary account and 8% to the MediSave account. From age 35 to 55, you'll see that there's a gradual shift in allocation to the MediSave account, and this is to prepare Singaporeans for the increasing healthcare needs as we grow old. Above 65 years old, CPF contributions is capped at 12.5%, majority of which 10.5% of the contribution is allocated to the MediSave account. This is to maintain the basic healthcare sum and to ensure that there's sufficient sum to meet the medical needs at old age. And premiums for the MediShield Life are age dependent, and this is to avoid intergeneration cross subsidies. And it's especially important for an aging society like Singapore. When premiums are not priced by age, the ratio of the benefits to the number of contribution will rise over time due to this demographic shift. When the number of growing elderly is being supported by a shrinking number of younger policyholders, this will in turn lead to an increasing burden on future generations and thus isn't sustainable. So the government also provides significant support to help Singaporeans with their premiums. This includes premium subsidies of up to 50% for the lower to middle income, pioneer generation subsidies of up to 60% and MediSave top-ups for the pioneer generation, and additional premium support for those who are still unable to pay the premium despite all the help offered. Right, so the contribution from BPJS are obtained from the following categories of members as shown in the table on the top right. So firstly, the salaried workers that comprises of the government staff as well as the private companies' employees, of which they pay 5% of the monthly salary. Secondly, the non-salaried workers in the informal sector as well as the unemployed will pay a fixed contribution equivalent to 4 to 16 Sing dollars per month. And lastly, PBI, which is the subsidized group, are fully paid for by the government. So the less than desirable fund experience of BPJS can be attributed to, firstly, inadequate contribution. So the amount of contribution for the fund is significantly lower compared to Singapore's MediShield Life. However, the contribution rate for the informal sector has been recently revised early this year, and it's been interesting to see how that actually works out for the fund. Secondly, the contribution rate is static in the sense that it does not reflect the changing needs as we grow old. So one would expect to have higher incidence of hospitalization and medical needs as we grow older, and contributions should be adjusted to reflect the higher expected claim experience. So lastly, there's no formal avenues to collect contributory premium from workers in the informal sector. Hence, they have very low payment collectability rate as seen from the table at only 50%. So while mandatory deductions make it easier for BPJS to ensure formal sector's workers pay monthly contribution, and the PBI, the subsidized group, are paid for by the government, contributions from the informal sectors are harder to collect as these members require to pay contribution each month on their own volitions. So contribution from informal sector is expected to drop as well because healthy members may not see value in paying for premiums they are not using. So perhaps government should make household enrollment mandatory and to ease the payment by offering online payment options or automatic deduction similar to that of the gyro in Singapore. Also in Singapore case, to facilitate premium recovery, regular reminders are also given to policyholders to remind them to pay their premium. Perhaps BPJS could also do the same. So the growing deficit experienced by BPJS indicates that the expenditure has been growing faster than the contribution received. So one reason for that, as mentioned earlier, is because of participants in the informal sector. The informal sector has the highest claim ratio and utilization rate compared to the other membership categories as seen on the table. So this indicates that these volunteer enrollees will most likely enroll with pre-existing condition, commonly known as adverse selection. The high demand is due to the comprehensive benefits that the scheme offers without any cost sharing involved, that covers high-cost medical procedures of which they were previously not eligible to claim. And once they receive the medical benefits, many actually stop paying contribution. Hence, it's not only necessary to make scheme attractive so that healthy members remain in the scheme, but also to limit adverse selection through additional loading for participants with pre-existing condition to reflect the higher risk they pose to the pool. Secondly, the NHIF or BPJS is a capitation payment system where the healthcare facility receives a monthly capitation per member per month. So capitation payment accounted for approximately 95% of the expenditure collectively. While capitation has the benefit of having more predictable costs to cover first-level care, it may incentivize healthcare providers to underprovide or over-refer patients, thereby leading to an increase in more expensive hospital-level care, which ultimately drives up the healthcare expenditure. In addition, due to the smaller proportion of public to private healthcare facilities available, private partnership is necessary to absorb the growing enrollment of the scheme. However, contracting private clinics has financial implications as higher capitation rates are required to attract them to participate. So as observed from BPJS, any nationwide health insurance without any sort of budgetary limitations can lead to overconsumption and over-servicing and tends to be unsustainable over time. With that said, MediShield Life has several cost containment measures in place to ensure that the fund remains sustainable and prevent overutilization. This includes, as we saw previously, restrictions and limits to benefits payout, deductibles and co-insurance, also higher premium for riskier groups, which there's an additional 30% loading for policyholders with pre-existing condition for the first 10 years. So moreover, fiscal prudency is also practiced at the whole government level, and the government believes that targeted subsidies instead of universal subsidies is more equitable, as monies are given to individuals that are the most deserving. And lastly, majority of Singaporeans have integrated shield plan on top of their MediShield Life. So IP insurers that offer zero co-payment coverage experience rising claim costs due to overconsumption and over-servicing of healthcare services. This behavior is termed as buffet syndrome, whereby there's no incentive for policyholders nor providers to keep costs in check, as they think private insurance will pay for it. So as shown in the chart below, the industry actually experienced a loss margin of 7.2% in 2016. This eventually leads to premium hikes, making premium and healthcare less affordable. As such, the government eventually mandates a minimum 5% co-payment for new IP plan riders. And this also highlights the relationship between various stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem, and that management of public-private partnership is important and necessary to keep costs of healthcare in check. So the World Health Organization defines health equity as the fair opportunity to attain their full potential, health potential, and that no one should be disadvantaged from achieving that potential. In other words, there is no barrier to accessing healthcare services regardless of socioeconomic background. So for Singapore case, the greater emphasis of individual responsibility meant higher out-of-pocket expenses. Also, the saving nature of the Medisave scheme meant that the low-wage earners face greater burdens in paying for their medical bills compared to the rich. Restrictions such as claim limits, deductibles, and exclusion, or rather higher premium rates for pre-existing condition, further limits its effect in financial protection and worsen the issue of equity. And according to data from the World Bank, a substantial proportion of healthcare expenditure comes out from the private pockets of the population. And it's no wonder that Singaporeans, especially the low-income earners, worry about not having sufficient savings to pay for their medical bills. That said, the Singapore government has instituted numerous measures to ease the anxiety and bridge the equity gap over the last decade. So these measures include the enhancement of schemes such as MediShield and ElderShield towards universalism, Pioneer Generation Package and subsidies for the older generation who might not have sufficient savings in their Medisave accounts, and the Community Health Assist Scheme to reduce the out-of-pocket expenses. Also, claim limits and health policies are periodically reviewed to ensure that healthcare costs remain affordable. And for Indonesia case, before the introduction of the scheme, low-wage earners in Indonesia have very limited access to healthcare. However, this has improved significantly with the implementation of the BPJS, as contributions for the vulnerable group is fully subsidized for by the government. Since its inception, it has now covered around 200 million people, making it the biggest single-payer health system in the world. Also, there's no cost sharing involved, where providers cannot charge members for the scheme for services that they provide. However, there's an uneven geographical distribution of healthcare facilities, whereby most quality healthcare services are concentrated within the cities, with half of Indonesia's population living in rural areas coupled with the relatively undeveloped public healthcare system and lack of medical personnel. That means that the poor continue to have limited access to quality healthcare. So the relatively low claim ratio from this category of membership does not necessarily mean that this group do not require as much healthcare as the informal sector, but rather it's due to the lack of awareness of or accessibility to healthcare. Thus, there's a need to enlarge the distribution and quality of healthcare services in the rural area to enhance the healthcare access to all. Yeah. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you. I'll pass the time now to Robin, who will talk about the P2P healthcare.
Okay, I will be the last speaker for today's forum. Okay, my name is Robin. I'm going to give you a quick introduction on P2P mutual healthcare funding in China, mainly focusing on 相互保, a very popular critical illness product in China. So here is a brief overview. First, I will go through the background on the overall healthcare landscape in China. and Xianghubao's product design. Next, I'll move on to Xianghubao's statistics, Xianghubao's customer profile, and its claim and premium. Thirdly, we'll be doing a comparison between Xianghubao and traditional life products and outline the pros and cons of Xianghubao. Lastly, just some personal thoughts on how the P2P product will move on in the future. So here is a current market overview. To the left-hand side, it's a CIRC regulated, which is equivalent to Singapore's MAS. So we have the traditional life insurance company where it's licensed by CIRC, and it's a centralized company and subject to a C-ROSS reporting framework similar to RBC2. We also have the National Healthcare Security System, similar to MediShield in Singapore. So it's a government-funded medical coverage for all residents in China. And lastly, we also have the InsurTech company, which is operating on blockchains. And on the right-hand side, we have platforms for crowdfunding, where patients can raise funding from the public for their medical bills. And these platforms are not CIRC regulated. And last but not least, we have those charity foundations such as Red Cross, where they support patients for their medical bills. And right in the middle, we have Xianghubao. This product is launched as an insurance product and subsequently taken down by the CIRC because of false advertising and other issues, and relaunched as a mutual fund with a critical illness. Now let's look at the Xianghubao's timeline. So when Xianghubao is launched as a fully decentralized blockchain-powered product, it was first launched on Alipay app in October 2018 by Ant Financial. It's a subsidiary of Alibaba. It provides a basic protection against 100 types of critical illness with no upfront premiums. Until now, has reached a customer base of 100 million customers. So since its launch in 16 October, within 3 days, 3 million has signed up. At that point in time, it's backed by Xingmei Insurance Company as an insurance product regulated by CIRC. Within 1 month after launch, it reached a 20 million customer base. And on the 27th November of 2018, CIRC decided to take down Xianghubao as an insurance product because of false advertising. So during the marketing campaign, they claimed that the cost shared will always be less than $100 renminbi, which is not the case. So they changed the name from Xianghubao to Xianghubao, although the name is exactly the same, but the meaning is different. The Bao meaning from protection to treasure. So from that point in time, it becomes a mutual fund rather than an insurance product. And half a year later, a senior version of Xianghubao is launched, catered for seniors above 60s. And 1 year later, they reach a total customer base of 100 million. And in this year, they top up the cover with additional 100,000 for death due to COVID. Okay. So now let's look at the product design. For you to be eligible for Xianghubao, you have to have a credit score of Sesame credit score of more than 650. So credit score, Sesame credit score is like Alipay's own credit rating. So as you know, Alipay is the most popular mode of payment in China. So based on your past transaction history, they can assess your credit rating, whether you have been making timely payment of your bills and such. So because the unique design of Xianghubao, the payment is collected after the claim has incurred. Alipay need to ensure that you have enough money inside your Alipay to pay your debt, to pay your claims. And you have to be less than 60 years old and also fulfill an online declaration. The coverage Xianghubao provides is 300,000 renminbi for those below age 40, and above age 40s, you receive 100,000. So as I said, there's no premium required upon joining of the schemes. Only upon claim, all the participants in the pool will share the cost. The renewability of the scheme is not guaranteed, so Ant Financial has the right to terminate Xianghubao at its own discretion. So for 相互保 to exist, it needs a minimum customer base of 3.3 million participants. So how is it derived? It's a simple math. So assuming there's only one claim, which is 300,000, 10% expense, a minimum premium of 10 cents per person. Hence, the minimum premium will be 300,000 times 1.1 divided by 0.1, giving a 3.3 million customer base. Here's the health declaration. So first part is your claim history. You should have not made any claim more than 20,000 and above. And for medical histories, you should not have taken medication for more than 30 days and hospitalized for more than 15 days for the past 2 years. And this is the list of pre-existing conditions. So here, let's look at the customer journey of a 相互保 participant. So upon inception, after going through 90 days of waiting period, so for healthy members, you will wait for a public announcement on the 7th and the 21st of each month for the claim has incurred during this period. After which, at 14 and 28 of each month, there will be an automatic deduction of the claim amount from your Alipay account. For those patients who are going to submit, they have to submit a claim, upload evidence, so N Financial will verify the entire community inside 相互保 will verify. If there's no objection, sum assured will be paid out. For those who are less than 40 will receive 300,000, and for those 40 and above will receive 100,000. If there's objection, it will go back to the pool and everyone will vote again. If more than 50% of the community vote for yes, it will be the claim will be paid. If not, the claim will be rejected. So let's look at the demography of 相互保 participants. 58% of the participants come from 80s to 90s generations who are currently at the age of 30s, which are pretty young. And because it's affordable price, 60% of 相互保 participants come from tier 3 and below cities, which are generally less developed with limited insurance access. Their annual income is less than 100,000 renminbi, which is equivalent to around 20,000 Sing dollar. And another thing is Alipay made it so easy to sign up for your families. 20% of the entire pool actually come from family sign up, so you can sign up for your kids, for your families. And last part is claims. So 54% of the claims happens when you're away from your hometown. This is a very common thing in China where tier 3 and rural areas go to tier 1 or tier 2 cities to work. So claim often occur where you're working away. Out of which, cancer made up the highest claim amount, with thyroid cancer, breast cancer, and lung cancer as the most common type of cancers. So now look at the cost. So this is the trend of number of participants and claim costs over the past 1 year. You can see the green line has been growing steadily over the past 1 year, reaching 100 million. As for claim costs, it starts to escalate after half a year, once the waiting period is over and the underwriting effect has wear off. There's a huge spike at 1 year anniversary. You can see there's a huge jump. So going forward, if the cost will continue to increase at the rate that participants join, the per head cost share will continue to increase. So how does 相互保 differ from the traditional product? Let's do a comparison. So for a traditional life product, for a person to buy a policies, we pay a fixed premium. And the funding sits with the insurance company. And if there is a claim, we will assess and it will pay out to the policyholder. As more and more claim occurs, the claim amount might exceed the premium collected. Insurance company will pay out of their own pocket. So premiums are known and prepaid. It's a centralized mechanism where the money sits with the insurance company. the company bears the insurance risk and also the investment risk. And it's a different case for 相互保 as everyone shares the cost. The money goes straight to the patient who are making the claim. And if there's more people making the claim, we have to share more costs. And this is a question mark. You would never know how much you're going to pay. It's really based on how healthy the pool is. And on top of that, you have to pay additional 8% of management expense to 相互保 for operating this platform. So the payment are determined post-claim. It's a decentralized mechanism where the funding sits with individual, not with the company. And the participant bears the insurance risk, investment risk, and the catastrophic risk. Imagine everyone in the pool is sick. Essentially, you have to pay your sum assured plus additional 8%. And lastly, the coverage is not guaranteed. So now look at the entire value chain. Assuming the customer pays 100%, 20% goes to distribution costs, another 15% goes to management expense, another 10% goes to cost and capital, and lastly 10% for profit. So essentially, it's only 40% for the protection costs. Customers are paying much more than what protection actually costs. So 相互保 mechanism bypass all these charges and bring really just the protection back to the customer, behaving like a mutual fund with a critical illness trigger. So now let's look at the advantage of 相互保. Always, it's very intuitive, it's accessible protection, it's simple, it's very affordable, and provides the basic protection to everyone. It's also very flexible, you can join and cancel anytime, and the onboarding process is really fast. And below water, you can see that there are many other benefits where it's not so apparent. Firstly, is the visibility. Because of the design has attracted so much attention, there's really a very high amount of online traffic. There's a brand awareness, so everyone is talking about it. It's saving a lot of marketing costs. So all the other products, that's insurance product that's on Alipay platform, based on Alipay stats, have increased 60% in sales. So it's secondary effect to above what 相互保 is doing. So 相互保 brings up all the sales of all the other insurance products currently is offered on Alipay app. The fourth is on cross-selling. So it's creating a insurance awareness for those people joining 相互保. They are triggering the thought of buying insurance. So based on the stats, 1 in 6 bought another insurance plan within 6 months of purchasing 相互保. And lastly, it's about market integration, where Ant Financial doesn't only cover insurance, it covers investment, covers healthcare, covers banking. So the process is so smooth that it's just one place we can settle everything. There's no need for you to look for different providers for different needs. So now let's look at shortcomings of 相互保. First is the most obvious one is anti-selection, where as the cost shared per person increase, healthy life will leave the pool and unhealthy life will remain. This will worsen the situation as the claim cost will keep increasing as the unhealthy tends to get sick more. And secondly it has a floating clause, which means unlike traditional products where you have a policy document, the wordings inside there are fixed upon the inception. 相互保's definition of the major critical illness, the payout, those definitions can be changed. For example, there's a very rampant abuse of thyroid cancer in the past few years in China. So 相互保 has removed it from 300K payout and drop it to early cancer payout, which you only entitled to 50K. And thirdly is its non-regulated nature. So it's not regulated as an insurance product, so there's no reserving cost of capital. So, and government can really just call off this kind of P2P mutual funding platform anytime. So the participants will be unprotected. And lastly is the sustainability of this kind of product. So as the pool ages, definitely the claim cost per person shared will increase, and how far does the participant willing to bear the cost. So assuming when you're older, you think the cost is, you can't afford it anymore, at that point in time, if you want to switch to a proper insurance product, you might be too old to buy one, or it's too costly to buy one, and by the time you have many pre-existing conditions already. And lastly, just some food for thoughts. First is from a distribution perspective. So in Singapore, we operate on a traditional intermediated advisory basis, whether Thai agency or financial advisors. Those operate a very high distribution cost. The success of Xianghu Bao attracting 100 million customers tells us maybe selling through agent might not be the only way to go. Selling through online can also attract customers, and it's not so costly. And secondly is the process. So all the typical insurance company offer product with cumbersome onboarding process, tedious underwriting questions. It is very good for a risk control perspective from a client on buying the product. The process is not so smooth. So when Xianghu Bao come out with this kind of design, it's very intuitive, and the onboarding process is really fast. That's something that we can learn from. And thirdly is on innovations. So Xianghu Bao has around 100+ employees managing 100 million customer base. In Singapore, our customer base is around a few hundred thousands, and I'm sure we hire more than 100 people to manage that. So using a blockchain technology can liberate us from and increase us data capacity to a higher level, and improving our efficiency of day-to-day operations. And lastly is regulations. So the Xianghu Bao's journey is severely impacted by regulatory body when the moment where CIRC took them off the shelf as the insurance product, it definitely take a hit. But it's regulators' view on new entrant to the market. So if they set the entry barrier very high, there's new entrant from other industry couldn't enter it. So insurance companies still can live in their own comfort zone. But if regulator feels that they lower the barrier to entry, there's more participants from other industry who can enter the insurance market, then the playing field will change, and insurance company will be forced to change. It will be a more competitive battleground, I feel. Yeah, so just some food for thoughts. Yeah, that's all for my presentation today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the three speakers here. Yeah, so Robin has already outlined some food for thoughts here. So I guess the three speakers here, they have talked about the universal coverage. Indonesia and Singapore talks about the sustainability of these two schemes. And Robin talks about the benefits and also the shortcomings of Xianghu Bao. So I hope that gives you some food for thoughts to see whether or not it's applicable for what you do. We have some questions. Robin, can you help me scroll to the next slide?
Okay.
Yep. So we do have some questions for the speakers here. The first one is, BPJS aims to cover 100% of Indonesians, but in actual fact, they only manage to cover about 93%. The remaining 7% makes up mainly the self-employed Indonesians, including the PHV drivers, property agents, etc. What does BPJS plan to do to the self-employed Indonesians?
Okay, so it's quite interesting. Now the 7%, whether it made up of self-driver, property agent, employee, that to be honest with you, I don't have the data, so I can't validate that bit. But what I know, if you are say Gojek driver, Grab driver, right? Self-employed. You belong to a category of membership where you're non-salaried worker, if you will. And what that means is you have to pay like a premium instead of your monthly salary being deducted. You now have to pay sort of monthly premium. Now, what I've seen is that a few ways to that the the providers are trying to encourage, if you will. So on the carrot side, if you will, uh, they try to enact this. Oh, hey, this is all of us in as one community. Play your part. So I think that's probably more on the incentive part. Other than that, there is no other real kind of like incentive or hey, you get this benefit if you join. So that part is quite clear. So they're just trying to play a bit more on nationalistic spirit. On the stick part, they now make it very clear. Okay, if you don't renew or you don't renew your contribution when you do your passport extension, or when you do your car license extension, you might face challenges. Because what happened is now the government can link up your ID, so then they can sort of identify, hey, it seems like you haven't really paid this premium. Now, on the low hurdle to pay or to join, this is another initiative the scheme run. So they make it very easy for you to pay or to even join. So for example, they ensure that you can now have an auto debit. I think that was one of the suggestion Yijun shared in the presentation. So now I think they have that system to auto deduct from your bank account if you set up for it. They make sure there is an online app. So I think that's the other approach. And the other bit, like what I mentioned, for premium payment, you don't have to go through the formal means anymore. You can go through the nearby market, mini market, like a 7-Eleven to sort of top up and pay your premium. So I think that's probably the three ways they are really doing to encourage collection of premium and encourage membership.
Yeah, thank you, Albertus. We also received quite a number of questions on 相互保. So Robin, what is your view about the chief actuary of the carrier, 信美人寿, was being fined by the regulator? How can actuaries like us protect ourselves in the journey of innovation?
Okay, so regarding the fine for Xingmei's chief actuary, I think the fine is not really a lot. It's 650,000. So I don't think they are fined. The reason they get fined is because of false advertising. So at the moment where they launch to attract attention, they advertise as the cost shared per person will never exceed $100. So this is the thing that brought the CIRC attention and fined them. But I don't think that the CIRC is trying to disencourage this kind of innovative product per se. It's just how you treat your customer and how you channel, how do you give them the impression of what your product is actually protecting. And for us, I think we should continue to innovate. For me, I think Singapore's product is not very innovative. So China's product is quite, although it's very controversial, but it gives us some food for thoughts where we can go in the future in terms of product designs. And when it comes to community, when there's any comeback, if the community regulates from 6 to when it comes. Sorry, I couldn't understand the second question. When it comes to
yeah, so I think there's a question for Robin. If claims and contributions increase so much that the participants start to exit and the fund goes into deficit, is Ant Financial responsible to fill the gap? So my understanding of this is sort of similar to the mutual or like Takafu kind of, yeah.
Yeah, no. So Ant Financial is there as just an admin. You can understand them as a TPA. They are not there to bear the risk of insurance risk. If there's no, if the claim keep escalating, the cost shared per person will just keep escalating. So that there's no sense where the fund will go into deficit because the cost will always be shared with the people remaining in the pool.
I see. Yeah, there's a lot of interest in this topic. So another question for Robin. For Xiaohubao, are they able to purchase reinsurance to protect their customers from large losses?
I think this should link to the previous one. The first, purchasing a reinsurance, there's cost, so it will definitely bump up the existing 8% management fee. And secondly, for you to get a reinsurance, I think you have to be an insurance in the first place. So I think there's other kind of capital finance structure, but from a reinsurance perspective, I think no.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I think it's questionable whether Xiaohubao is an insurance product by itself. And for Yijun, there's a question about private health insurance. So do you think with the universal healthcare, so for example, MediShield Life, so does it help or hinder, say, private health insurance?
So I believe that private health insurance and MediShield Life should work in tandem together. So so the IP insurance basically allows like policyholders to actually get higher standards of like healthcare. So MediShield Life itself basically just provides the most basic level of healthcare. So like with IP itself, if insurance or policyholders can be able to afford to and wish to like experience like or get higher standard of care, then obviously they can go for it. So obviously that comes to a point that whether IP itself can actually hinders like hinders the healthcare ecosystem in a way that's where product design comes into play. So that product designs of the policy insurance also has to be properly like managed in a way that so that basically like in the IP riders itself, that whether the government mandates like 5% co-payment. So that will encourage consumers to become more encourage them to seek more like cost-effective treatments, then which in turn like pressurize like healthcare providers to provide more cost-effective and efficient treatment. In a way, I guess like so I don't think it will hinder us, but it also kind of like to work in tandem together.
Yeah, I think certainly. I think the speakers have highlighted that the importance of public and private partnership in healthcare system. So yeah, they're certainly important for both to work together. There's one more question on anti-selection and sustainability with medical inflation of 8% per annum, for example, are also shortcomings of traditional health insurance product. This doesn't just apply to P2P health insurance, right? Any speakers want to take this up? So medical inflation being the shortcomings of the traditional health insurance products. Is this just specific to P2P? Or any of you wants to comment on medical inflation?
Hello?
Yes, Robin?
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Anti-selection. Hello, can you hear?
Hello, yes.
Yes, anti-selection and sustainability with medical inflation of 8% per annum are shortcomings of traditional health insurance products. Is this limited to P2P health insurance? Is this also an issue for health, P2P health insurance?
I think in regard to this from a Xiaohubao's design, it's actually the risk that inflation is passed back to the participants, so they are bearing the inflation, and to add on to that, actually Xiaohubao is some sort of profiteering from the inflation because their 8% of management expense is on top, is a percentage of the total medical cost. So if the medical cost increases, their 8% in the purely absolute amount will also increase.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's the spirit of peer-to-peer sharing of the cost and inflation. Yeah, so we do have further questions on Xiaohubao again. So for P2P, the claim is funded by consumers in the pool. Are there mechanisms which help to protect consumers from free riders who just join when they want to claim, but not really pooled for funding?
So if you join Xianghubao and you join and leave, you have to basically pay 3 months. You have to share the cost for 3 months while getting no benefit, because every time you leave, when you rejoin, you have to go through another 90 days of waiting period. So at that period of time, you are actually sharing the cost of everyone in the pool who's entitled to the protection. So it's designed that the cost is shared fortnightly. There's really no point for me from my perspective to go in and out very frequently, because the cost isn't really a build up. Every 2 weeks you have to share the cost.
Yeah, I see. Do they have to go through underwriting again? I think the health declaration that you shared.
Yes, so for every time you have to re-go through the online declaration, which means that you cannot claim more than 20K, you cannot have taken medication for the past 30 days or hospitalized for the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I see. I think we do have a few more questions, but conscious of time, I'll just pick one. I think this question is for Albertus. Under BPJS coordination of benefits, are hospitals required charge according to the BPJS fee schedule with no balance billing? Otherwise, in theory, as long as those willing to tolerate the BPJS queues and process and get their private hospital claims subsidized by BPJS.
Sorry, can repeat the question? So the question is under coordination benefits, the reimbursement is based on BPJS agreed fee. Is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that's the answer. Yeah. So even under coordination benefit, there needs to be sort of pre-agreed. I think the sort of the only benefit is then it. Oh, sorry. This is the coordination benefit, right?
Yes, the question is on coordination benefit.
Okay, so the role of private insurer, yeah. Okay, so the private insurer can then top up for by bringing in different, things that is not under the network lah. So the private insurer will then take on the excess cost beyond that the BPJS sort of pre-agreed, because this network will not charge or will not receive the same fees as what BPJS would have paid.
Yeah. Okay, I think we do have one last question. Again, it's on Xianghubao. So any idea on the Xianghubao profit margin, say within a 10% admin fee?
Oh, so when Xianghubao was first launched, it was designed at a 10% management expense. After they renamed, it dropped back to 8%. Currently, based on M Financial's report, they are just breaking even based on 8% management expense.
Yeah, thank you. We have come to an end to the Q&A. So I believe all the questions have been answered. We do have a couple of announcements to make. Just now at the beginning of this forum, I did mention that the joint SAS and IAHS Health Conference has been postponed to next year, Q2, because of the COVID-19 situation. But in the meantime, the SAS is actually planning on virtual and land-based conferences in 2020. There are some tentative plans, including virtual health and retirement conference in August or September. So more information will be circulated to the members at a later date. The SAS is also planning on a conference super week in November this year. It would be 4 to 5 days, the entire week, comprising various things like practicing certificate seminar, volunteer appreciation dinner, and half-day to a day conferences by life, GI, health, retirement, ERM, and data analytics. It will be land-based if possible. If not, some of these conferences would be virtual. Then we won't be able to do volunteer appreciation dinner. So with that, we also want to thank our 2020 SAS sponsor, China Re, for making the above plans possible. We are still calling for additional sponsors for this year. So that means that with more funds, we can deliver better, higher quality conferences for our members. So with that, this comes to an end of the afternoon forum. We will be sharing the slides, put it on SAS website. And when that is ready, Patsy will send an email to inform the members here. Okay, thank you for your participation.